Hello, hello. I think that I am live. Freely admit, I freely admit I don't know. I think I am live now. Even though I've done this this is six, so this is 6 weeks in a row we've done this. But I don't know. I guess I need to play around with it because it always says it's going to go live automatically. Like it doesn't seem to do anything. And then I hit a button and it's, I don't know, maybe I was on it. Whatever, whatever. Well, hello, hello. Happy March! Happy March! I had to show you, for those of you who saw when I got myself flowers the other week. I got myself flowers this week, but just from the yard. And we're having an early spring. I know several people I've talked to said that they're worried it's going to get cold. I don't know. I had the feeling we're not going to have a cold snap. I don't think we're going to. So y'all can come back and tell me later wrong. Because, our freeze date, May 15th, June 1st, June 15th, if you look at like the percentage of when you'll have a freeze. So it's been a warm winter, and it's been for us here in the mountains in Virginia. But I'm enjoying my daffodils. I love them. There's a smell. When I smell daffodils, and it doesn't matter if they're like in the grocery store, and they don't have a lot of smell, or some of these ones that have great smell, I am immediately transported to being a little girl. I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10, in a yard, and it's like I'm on a treasure hunt. And it's one of those times, I don't know if you had this. I hope that you did. And I hope that kids today still do have these times when they get to be out on their own and kind of nobody knows exactly where they are or exactly what they're doing. And they're sort of in a timeless, spaceless place, and they're experiencing the magic of the world, of the universe. And so for me, it would be maybe if we were visiting a relative, or maybe if I was in a yard somewhere, and then you discovered, because daffodils will stay blooming long after, yes, it's a bulb, and they'll come up again and again, and so you can find them anywhere. I saw some. Where I saw some yesterday? We have Interstate 81 goes through here. It's a pretty heavy road. Heavily trafficked road. A lot of tractor trailers, a lot of traffic on that road. And I was over near there, and I was exiting, and there was a row of daffodils along the shoulder, but this was the weird thing. It was between the interstate and like an exit ramp, and I'm thinking, it's so interesting to me because usually, like, we have some outside that we've planted, and the deer have left alone. Thank you, deer. Thank you, deer. And we have some from an old homestead that was here, and you'll find those all the time. There's an old homestead, and there have been some daffodils. But I was like, okay, when they did the interstate, right, they must have torn everything up. The dirt had to have been moved. There can be an old homestead. Where did those daffodils come from? Anyway, I'm running on, but I love daffodils. I try to put them in the picture. They're so beautiful. But I love them because they just there's that smell immediately transports me to that magical place. We had a neighbor growing up, and he was older and on his own, and he ended up going to live in a nursing home. And the way that our houses were, you went across the street, and it was sort of the back of it. We didn't know him very well. We didn't visit him. But one day, I think we were just exploring in the neighborhood, and we went past the front of his house was actually huge, this huge yard and garden. And I remember discovering it one day and tiptoeing around and finding these like daffodils cascading down the hill. It was just a magical spot. So I love anything like that. But anyway, okay, what are we here to talk about today? I'm glad that, I'm sorry for being a little late. That's one other thing. I thought I would be late last week. I was in court. Here's my shameless plug for being a CASA. If you don't know what a CASA is, it's a court-appointed special advocate. I was in court for that. And that is a wonderful thing you can do if you live in the U.S., in any state, I believe, any state in the nation. If you want more information, you can message me and I'll tell you about it. But it's a pretty cool thing to do. And but I wasn't late for that because court was quick. But I was a little late today because my daughter forgot her water bottle. So I didn't have to take it to her. She would have lived at school. But you know what? She drinks a lot of water, and that's mostly what she drinks. And I was very happy that I had the time, and and was able to go and take it to her. So a little late for today. But anyway, I wanted to talk about something today that has happened for me in the last 24 hours or last week or so. And it took me a while to process a little bit, and then I realized something that I already knew, but I realized it in a new way. You ever have that? Like, you know something, and then you have a sort of event, you don't understand what's going on, and then you understand it in a whole new, bigger, deeper way. And I love that. It might not be your thing. I love it, though, because I know then that I'm in a better position to, for one, explain it to my children. If you know me at all, obviously my children are the most important things in my life, and people. And so I love being in an expanded place where then I can pass on understanding, knowledge, whatever to them. So this is a concept of as above, so below, right? As within, so without. And it's the idea that, what's a good way? I need a graphic, and I don't have a good picture, but I'll try to find one, and I'll put it below in the comments after I post the video. When I went to graduate school, so I studied agriculture, and I studied something called ecological agriculture. And there was an old school of thought, and a lot of it was based on Johann von Goethe's teachings. And it was a really interesting way of looking at plants. And I think the best plant to think of would be a tree, right? So if you think of a tree, what we see of a tree is the trunk. See my trees? Hello, trees. So you have a trunk, and you have the branches, and you have the leaves, right? What we don't see is what's underneath. Now, I think there may be a small exception to this, like palm trees, because I know palm trees have hardly any kind of root at all, which is why you often see, like in hurricanes, they get blown over. But most trees, you have as much biomass beneath the soil as you do above the soil. So, and at least that was the concept that he taught, and understanding what happens to plants when you do things to the plants to either limit the root growth or limit the top growth. So a good example is if you live in an area where they trim trees. Some people know how to trim trees, and some people don't know how to trim trees, and then some people trim ways that don't actually help the tree growth, but they just do it because it's cultural. Like in the Netherlands, there's a technique called coppicing, but you have to do it just right, and it's really cutting the tree pretty severely back in order to shape it in a particular kind of shape. If you don't know what you're doing, you can kill that tree pretty quick. One thing you might see is if you'll see people in your neighborhood or whatever trim trees, and they just randomly cut. What happens is there's so much more biomass that is, sucking up water and nutrients and trying to feed the tree, and then the sugars and the energy production gets all out of whack, and it'll attract insects and diseases. So the idea of as above, so below, as within, so without also applies to us. And it actually applies to everything that we do. And it can be a complex topic, but it doesn't need to be complex. I always think about it as, here's another example from when I was a little girl. So I have one brother, and I always looked up to him, and I love him very much. And he's a really cool guy. He's an engineer, and he thinks really, really differently from how I think. I'm not sure how much he appreciates how I think, but I enjoy, for the most part, how he thinks about things, because his brain looks at the world in a totally different way. And when I was a little girl, he was always, not trying necessarily, but he would teach me things, and just by how he was and the things he did. And one time we were walking on the beach, and if you ever walk on the beach barefoot and the sand squeaks, and you can really hear it squeak, and I was like, oh, listen, like, to me, it was just a little bit of magic, like, wow, the sand squeaks. And he says, well, everything has a vibration, and everything is vibrating all the time, and music, sound is a vibration. And so, I know for some people that would take a little bit of the magic, the beauty, whatever out of it. But for me, it was just fascinating, this idea that everything is vibrating, right? So every particle of sand is vibrating, and, every seashell is vibrating, every piece of grass, every person is vibrating, right? So we are, and don't ask me to explain the physics of it all, but we are, because it can get pretty wild when you look at quantum physics, and you look at, like, we're made up of molecules and atoms, and what is actually an atom, and and things like that. But we're vibrating, we're moving, right, at certain places, and we tend to match things that are a match to the vibration we're at, right? So I had yesterday I did something and I wasn't proud of myself about it. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because I haven't fully worked through it. I just wasn't being my best self. I wasn't being my best self. I wasn't being bad and doing things. I didn't hurt anybody or I didn't do anything. I'm not going to go to jail or anything. But I just wasn't my most present, my very best self. And then this morning, and even later last night, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good about myself. I didn't feel good about what had transpired. And I was in my head about like, oh, why did I do that? How did I get started down that road? Did it momentum? How can I not do that next time? What can I do differently? How can I be differently? And because that's my tendency I usually look at myself. And it just wasn't working. I wasn't getting anywhere. I was just feeling worse. There was more things that were happening that I didn't like. I was sort of interacting with my children in a way that I was regretting. And, again, I'm making this sound like a big old deal. It wasn't a big old deal. It was a very small deal. But it was growing. It was growing. And I was not treating myself well. So I decided, I said, well, I'm not a big journaler. I don't know if you're a journaler. If you are, I'd love to hear about it. I would love to hear if you're a journaler and how it works for you. I have found that when I've been encouraged to journal and when I do, it does help me quite a bit. I tend to be like a processor in my head if I'm walking or driving or thinking. But when I have written it down, it does help me sometimes. I cannot read. This is what I want to know if you journal. I can't read what I write. I write really fast. I have really messy handwriting. My thoughts are going way too fast to keep up with my hand, and my hand cramps, and I have just tons to put out there. So if you do journal, I would really like to. Do you need to be able to read it? Because sometimes I want to go back and see the points and the things, and I just have to let it go. I just have to say, oh well, I don't know. I don't know what that was. So I'm curious if you journal, if being able to read what you wrote is important. But that aside, as I was kind of working through it, I had a much deeper understanding. And this is what I'm talking about. Like I had a much deeper understanding of as within, so without, as above, so below. So here's the deal. I was thinking that for some reason I had an instinct to do something. I kind of followed through on it. And then it just went down a pattern of behavior that while it wasn't bad, it wasn't my best self. It wasn't the person that I know that I can be. And I was thinking that I needed to start at the beginning of that and kind of unravel it and see where to go. But what I realized was it had nothing to do with that. What it actually was is that inside I was feeling like I wasn't being my best self. Inside, my feeling was actually the precursor. Or it doesn't matter. I mean, one's the precursor, one's not, right? But I was feeling maybe, if not like a little ashamed, just like not like I was being the best I could be. I wasn't being the best I could be. And therefore, I was attracting thoughts, impulses, ideas to do things that just weren't my very best self. To say things that weren't my very best thoughts. And so we were just a match. I was in my feeling of not being as good as I could be. And so I was a match to doing things and having impulses and having ideas of not as good as I could be. And that's all it was, right? And that's all it was. And the cool thing about that is I don't need to beat myself up. I don't need to I can definitely tell a different story, and we'll talk about that another time, because storytelling is a really important part of creating your life that we don't always acknowledge. But all I need to do is say, well, I can focus on feeling like I'm my very best self. So you can do that in different ways. You can do that by physically doing things so you feel like your very best self. So like if you feel like exercising is part of being your very best self, you can go exercise, and then you'll feel like, oh, I'm being my very best self, right? or you can go and do something kind for someone, or you can do something that you know that makes you feel good about who you are. Or, that's sort of like a shortcut. You can just feel that feeling of I'm my very best self. And you can sit with that. And you can use it for me, I can say, okay, what is it that I want? Well, I want to feel my very best self. How does my very best self feel? She feels happy, and she feels loving, and she feels giving, and she feels present, and she feels tapped in, tuned in, turned, like she's alive, and she is there and receiving, the best things of the moment and transmitting, giving that back to people. And I can really feel that. And then those things that are matched for that will come. And so I think I just wanted to share that with you today because of a couple of things. One, we don't have to make everything such a big, fat, hairy deal, right? I don't know if you do that or not. If you're an introspective person, we can make things a big, fat, hairy deal, right? It can really blow up on our heads, and we're probably often our own worst critic, even if you're not that introspective. But most of us are our own worst critic. We don't have to do that. We don't have to make it complex. It doesn't have to be a big, fat, hairy deal. We can just realize, hey, for whatever reason, I was a match to that thought, that situation, that occurrence. And that's not what I want to be a match to. Now, if it is something you want to be, okay, then do more of that. But if it's not something you want to be a match to, what do I want to be a match to? And then adjust accordingly. It's pretty simple. And then the second thing is just the idea that don't have to judge yourself or judge others or judge a situation. My middle son has recently fussed at me for using the word should, and so we've been working at eliminating that from our vocabulary because it is a judgment about something that you're either not going to do or you didn't do, or you fully have taken your power out of being in the present moment, right? I should have done that. I should do this. You are not, when you're using the word should, you are not in the present moment. You are in the past, you are in the future. And it is a judgment of which way you go. So if you go with it, you'll be lined up for a little while, but it's really easy to get crisscross of that. Judgment is one of the key things that keeps us away from our good, that keeps away from the things that we want, away from the things that we desire. So learning to not judge a situation that you don't like is really, 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 really important. It's important. I was about to say comparison, because I was thinking there's another saying, that comparison is the thief of joy. And so it's that judging this good to be bad, comparing right or wrong, it steals our joy. It steals our ability to be present. It steals our ability to be okay with what's happening right here. And so if we can learn to let go of the judgment, if I can let go of the judgment of whatever it was that I did yesterday, which was really not a big deal at all. It wasn't anything. But I don't see it as right or wrong. I just see it as a reflection of where I was feeling, where I was vibrating, who I was being. And then I can decide, is that what I want? Not because it's bad, not because it's good, not because one's right or one's wrong. What do I want? And how do you know? Like, well, that didn't feel good. It didn't feel good. So by choosing to do what I want, right, then I'm freer to make a different choice. And I'm freer to just move. I don't have to make it a big, fat, hairy deal. I can let go of the judgment, and I'm free to move into a space that I want to be in. And I'm feeling a lot freer and lighter today, now. Not this morning, but I am now. And so it's lunchtime. I haven't had lunch today because I am running a little late on things, but I'm excited for how the rest of the day is going to unfold. And I hope that you are too. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. And again, if you're a journaler, I am dying to know about the can you read your own journaling. I'm super curious about that. Okay. My dearest, my loves, have a wonderful Wednesday. Happy March. Ours, I can't decide if it came in like a lion or a lamb. It was a little actually kind of cold and chilly. It was in the 40s and gray. I'm going to call that a lion. It wasn't a roary lion, but it was a It was a grumpy lion. So maybe it'll go out like a lamb. Sun's coming out today, though. Okay, happy March. I'll talk to you next week. See ya.